Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Adopting Responsible Gaming in the New Frontier. We have two presenters from the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. Long Bond is a program manager with the Mass Gaming Commission. He works collaboratively with casino operators and other stakeholders on a range of casino and community-based initiatives to build a sustainable and socially responsible industry in the state. He's a licensed independent clinical social worker with clinical experience in community-based and acute settings with addiction, HIV/AIDS issues, and mental health. Also, Mark Vander Linden has served as Director of Research and Responsible Gaming for the Massachusetts Gaming Commission since 2013. In this role, he manages an extensive research agenda to advance an understanding of responsible gaming, gambling disorders, and the social and economic impacts of casino gambling in Massachusetts. Additionally, he works collaboratively with casino operators and other stakeholders on a range of casino and community-based initiatives to build a sustainable and socially responsible industry in the state. And Mark is going to take it away to start us off.
Great. Thank you, Anne, and thanks for inviting Long and I to give a talk today. I really appreciate it. One thing in my introduction is it's not the latest version because it doesn't include sports wagering, which is kind of taken over our landscape in the past 12 months since sports wagering launched in March of last year. And before I begin, I just want to say Massachusetts, like almost every jurisdiction that I talk with that has recently legalized or launched sports wagering, we're grappling with what is the best response here. How do you do effective either responsible gaming or harm mitigation in a vastly changing environment? And hence the title of this talk is Adopting Responsible Gaming in the New Frontier. It is literally like the Wild West in a lot of ways, both in terms of who are we talking about, who is our target audience, how do we communicate with them, what is the research that backs this up. I think let's struggle with this together is what I would say. So why does this matter? You have to have a goal. You have to know where you're going. And so the goal is for individuals who choose to gamble, we seek a way to steer them towards healthier gambling behaviors, resulting in healthier communities. I would say that, as a regulatory agency, and I imagine that many of you in the same way, you're not tied to casino or gaming revenue. You're tied to the individuals who you serve, and let that be your sort of guiding light. And so with that, there's also a vision of, especially as a regulatory agency, of an effective, sustainable, measurable, socially responsible, and accountable approach to gambling. And you'll see that this vision comes back up as we talk about our overall framework of how we approach responsible gaming. And that's a lot of words all in one, but each of them really matter. But what really stands out to me is how do we build a sustainable industry in the state where we focus more on promoting healthier gambling for the long haul rather than excessive or unhealthy gambling that would resort in an industry that isn't sustainable. We also focus a lot on, I'm sorry, Long, just one last thing, an effective responsible gaming, which ties our responsible gaming efforts to the research agenda, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes too. All right, so Long, then next slide, thank you. And so everybody there's a lot of talk about how vastly different it is now than it was prior to 2018, and just how much the nature of gambling has changed. In fact, and it feels that way, right? It feels like we're moving into this new frontier. It feels like we have to approach our work different than we did previously. But if you'll notice, like, the nature of gambling is always changing. And so long, if you could go to the next slide. And all the way back to 1988, when the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act was passed, that allowed tribes to open up casinos on their lands. It then led to a whole change in the gambling landscapes, as then states started offering state-regulated gambling. It was a huge expansion through the 90s and early 2000s. And so if you think that it's changing a lot now, you don't have to look too far into the past to see that there was another huge expansion of gambling. Next slide. So I've been with the Gaming Commission now for, and long, you can go to the next slide too. I've been with the Gaming Commission for almost 11 years now. And I started as the first director of research and responsible gaming when the Gaming Commission formed just the year prior to that. And it formed because of the passage of the Expanded Gaming Act that offered casinos in the state. We were a latecomer to offering casinos in the United States. And so it was very prescriptive. It wasn't opening the floodgates to casinos in the state. It broke it into 3 distinct regions that offered up to 3 resort-style casinos and 1 slot parlor. At this point, we haven't even fully realized that. We have 2 resort-style casinos in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is Region B, and just outside of Boston in Region A. We have 1 slot parlor down right on the border of Region A and C. And as I said before, a year ago, the Sports Wagering Act passed. We have sports books in each of those casinos, and then we have 7 mobile sports books as well. And you'll see that, from the beginning, there has been a commitment by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to implement a sustainable industry with effective, responsible gaming or consumer protection built into it. So the mission of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission is to regulate the legal casino, horse racing, and sports wagering industries with integrity and transparency. Our goal is to maximize consumer protections, minimize negative impacts, and promote responsible gaming through regulation, research, and informed policy making. I'd say that when I began at the Gaming Commission some years back, that was really important to me. I didn't want responsible gaming to be some type of, add-on to the regulatory infrastructure that was being built. I didn't want responsible gaming to be some type of sideshow at the casinos. It needs to be baked in, and you can see from the mission of the Gaming Commission, that's pretty baked in to how we do it. And we'll get into a little bit more of how it's integrated into the gaming landscape in Massachusetts here as we proceed. So there's 2 key mandates that I think are really important, mostly because it relates directly to my job. There's an annual research agenda. Every single year, we invest between $1.5 million and $2.5 million in understanding the impacts of casino gambling and sports wagering in the Commonwealth. Largely, it's about the social and economic impacts. It's not just about social impacts. We also want to understand, how has the casino industry, the gaming industry, contributed to the overall economic picture of the Commonwealth. But there is a lot of research that happens looking at the social effects of gambling, including neuroscience, psychology, sociology, and public health impacts. This couldn't be done without funding, right? Everybody, the gambling expansion is enormous. There continues to be no federal funding for any type of treatment, prevention, or research in the space. At least, hopefully, if GRIT passes, that will be the case. But I'm not too hopeful at this point, unfortunately. So there's unprecedented funding that was created through a public health trust fund to support this. That's basically a taxation on casino revenue that is dedicated to this research agenda, and it also provides an unprecedented funding for treatment, prevention, including responsible gaming. Last year, it was roughly $24 million went into the Public Health Trust Fund. There was also this funny little piece within the Expanded Gaming Act that required that casinos provide an on-site space for a substance abuse, compulsive gambling, and mental health counseling service provider. An on-site space, and this was an incredible, I think, feat to get it built into the law that each casino had to provide a space. You'll see how we operationalize that through the GameSense program here in just a few minutes. Next slide. So just real quick, the research agenda. We have 6 key areas of the research agenda. The goals of it are to inform best practice in responsible gaming strategies and methods, problem gambling prevention and treatment, and responsible gaming messages. And probably more importantly, to create and translate to support evidence-informed decision-making about gambling policy and regulation. I'm not a natural researcher by training or by education or experience. What has been incredibly important to me is to see that the research that's created from the research agenda is operationalized and used to make a difference, whether it be practice, policy, or regulation. We have 6 key areas of the research agenda, or arms of the research agenda, that you can see here. We work very closely with the University of Massachusetts Amherst, Dr. Rachel Volberg, Dr. Robert Williams, which has been the cornerstone of our research agenda for a number of years, through SIGMA, which is the social and economic impacts of gaming in Massachusetts, and MAGIC, which was the Massachusetts Gambling Impact Cohort study. These function like research institutes dedicated to gambling. They cover both social and economic research, and have been really an important piece of what we do. But that said, we also have several other key pieces here. We have done extensive research on the public safety or crime impacts related to casino gambling and now sports wagering. We have done funded probably 7, 8 studies that go directly to the communities around the casinos for those communities to partner with a research institute to ask important questions about impacts and explore what those are. And then, of course, program evaluation. Next slide, Lon. Since 2013, in 2013, 2014, we developed the first responsible gaming framework. And when I talked early on about what is the vision and what is the goal, it came from this responsible gaming framework. If you don't have a framework to kind of guide where you're going, you don't necessarily know where you're going. And so in 2014, we published the first responsible gaming framework in Massachusetts with the goal to provide accurate information and promote positive play, provide patrons adversely affected with help, and create a shared understanding of responsible gaming practices among individuals, the gambling industry, and the government. The last piece is really sort of built off of the Reno model, which recognizes that you can't just turn to the government. You can't just turn to you as service providers. You can't turn just to the industry, but it's really a shared responsibility in order to promote safer levels of gambling and to mitigate gambling related harm. So this was a new version of it was published in 2018 based on updated science and information. And we're actually working on a new version of the framework actively right now with the hopes of publishing it in the next few months that really recognizes updates in science, updates in technology, and the changing gambling landscape. Slide. So as much as I talk about research and I oversee a large research agenda, as much as we want an evidence-based approach to responsible gaming and harm mitigation strategies in Massachusetts, that isn't always possible, right? We are still a relatively young industry, a young field that has a lot to learn. And sometimes that means that you need to take a slightly different approach. And this has proven to be rather controversial in this field. So where there is an evidence-based approach where we can point to evidence, we will use that evidence and we will run with it. We will build programs from it. We will write policy based on it. But sometimes that evidence doesn't exist, right? And so we've adopted a precautionary approach, which basically states when there's some threat out there, when there's a known threat, where there's known harm, you don't sit back and wait for scientific certainty. You'll take a chance. You will point to other fields where evidence does exist, and you'll develop measures and initiatives that would specifically address that known harm. It doesn't mean that you sit back blindly and let it move forward. It means that you rely on pilot projects. It means that you are willing to try new things and closely monitor the effects of those to assure that you're doing no harm, that it has the intended outcome. And so we, especially in the early days of the Gaming Commission, relied heavily on the precautionary approach. And as Long will talk with you about the GameSense program and about Play My Way, these are perfect examples of precautionary approaches that have now built a certain amount of evidence behind them that tell us that we're heading in the right direction. Next slide. And I won't go through each of these, but the main point is that responsible gaming isn't a one-size-fits-all. It isn't a one strategy approach. You need to look at it from many different angles. You need to enroll the support of the industry as they look to make a commitment towards corporate social responsibility. You need to take a look at the public safety or public health impacts. You need to look at marketing. You need to look at the financial transactions. You need to look at how the casino and the commission engage with the community. And of course, you need to look at your overall approach of how you're promoting and supporting positive play. We look at this in three different ways. Largely, we look at it at how do we promote safer levels of gambling or responsible gaming. We look at how we support individuals that are experiencing gambling-related harm and help them access community resources. And we also look to partner with each of our licensees within the industry in the state to see how we can more closely work together towards for continuous improvement. Long, next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Long to talk about the GameSense, Play My Way, and voluntary self-exclusion. And please remember, like as we built these programs, especially GameSense and Play My Way, we were using that precautionary approach. This presentation doesn't allow for it, but we have built a fair amount of evidence that supports the efficacy of these two programs. So with that, Long, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. So I actually have the pleasure and the fun task of talking about the programs that we do provide in Massachusetts. So the first program I want to review or discuss is the GameSense. So as Mark mentioned, so what is GameSense? GameSense was developed by the British Columbia Lottery Corporation, BCLC, in 2009. It provides positive play, responsible gaming strategies, support, and voluntary exclusion. So in Massachusetts, as Mark mentioned previously, in the Expanded Gaming Act, it provided a space in the casino. And in Massachusetts, we decided to make that into a GameSense Information Center. So this is a center inside all the Massachusetts casino. It operates from 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. EBH, or Encore Boston Harbor, the casino near Boston, is 24 hours staffed. And the other two sites, when they're not staffed, they go to remote. So the GameSense advisors are always accessible, maybe not physically, but they will be accessible remotely through live chat. And the GameSense advisors are dedicated staff who work at the information centers, require extensive training in the areas of responsible gambling techniques, problem gambling behavior, and local resources for help. So in addition to receiving the training, they also offer trainings to the casino employees on responsible gaming and GameSense, because like Mark mentioned, this is a collaborative, the Reno model. We work all together, so really sort of adding that support.
And long before you go on, so today is Problem Gambling Screening Disorder Day. It's something that our GameSense team at each of the casino participates in. Just anecdotally, last year, one of our casinos, I don't know about the other two, but I imagine it's similar. They participated, they screened, I can't remember the total number, but 20% were positive. And it really speaks to sort of the utility of having an on-site space, the relationship that the GameSense team has built with especially regular customers at each of these casinos, and just the profound impact that problem gambling has within each of these casinos.
Sorry, I got too excited. So the next slide, what is Play My Way? So Play My Way is very unique. It's the first of its kind. Is a play management tool. It provides patrons the ability to set a budget and receive notifications as they approach their budget. So any of the electronic games in Massachusetts, we worked with the operators to develop a memorandum of understanding to implement this program into their electronic games. So this is where the patron can voluntarily set their daily, weekly, or monthly budget to enroll, and they can enroll this in the electronic gaming machine or through a GameSense kiosk. So in the GameSense Information Center, we have a kiosk there that the GameSense advisor can do a demonstration, walk them through, and assist in enrolling into the game, the Play My Way. One of the feature, they can change or unenroll anytime. So this is not, one of those things where they set and it's stuck forever. So if we give, the patrons that flexibility, is voluntary. They receive notifications. So as they approach their budget, either they set it daily, weekly, or monthly, or all three, or combination of the options. As they approach, their kiosk or the machine that they're playing will give them a warning or give them a notice. Hey, you're reaching 75%. You have reached your budget. Or, if they go over, every increments of 25%, they will receive a notification. Again, Play My Way is meant to be more of a tool, just sort of to, for players to be aware of their budget. The last feature, we do offer a enrollment incentive for the first time. So players that comes in and they want to give, Play My Way a trial, they will receive an incentive. Different properties will have different incentive. And this is really more of acknowledging, the players making this decision to set a budget. And importantly, it also gives them, in some places, we give them food vouchers. So it's a way of them taking time out from playing to go have a bite, to take leave of the gaming floor.
Hey, Long, can I just say a few other things about this? So this is an example of the precautionary approach. We developed this program in collaboration with the operators back in 2015, amidst a lot of controversy about its effectiveness, about its potential uptake, and about its cost from the industry largely. We proceeded recognizing that we would use this as a pilot project. Fast forward to today, it's largely no longer, innovative. That if you look to any of the major sports wagering apps, they offer largely the same type of tool. Where it is innovative, it still remains the only example of this type in the United States in a casino. It's interesting to me that something that has been so widely accepted within the sports wagering industry still remains largely elusive over in the brick and mortar casinos. So that's the piece. And we just recently released an evaluation of the program that basically shows that those two groups, those that enroll and those that don't, may come to the casino the same amount, but those who enroll actually have a lower expenditure, even though they score higher on a problem gambling severity index, higher on impulsivity, and lower on typical levels of pre-commitment. So really encouraging evaluation results, interesting movement forward with this type of tool. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes in the future in the brick and mortar space at least.
Yeah. So to add on to what Mark is saying, it is correct. Play My Way launched before I started at the Mass Gaming Commission. My understanding, when we developed the memorandum of understanding with the operators, there's a lot of pushback, and so Play My Way is not a stop; it's a soft stop. So it's really, as people approach, it's just more of informational, and as it became more effective, a lot of the operators with sports wagering are offering something, play management, the limits, where it is a hard stop. So we see that the movement. I just want to look at, there's a question from Carolyn. Is the incentive only upon enrollment, or are they provided throughout? So it is only the first time you enroll. So in some of the operators, they will give them a food voucher or credit onto their account, and then they can go to one of the cafeteria or the food establishment and redeem that credit. In other places, they will redeem at the Game Sense Information Center to verify this is the first time that they enrolled into the Play My Way. And I think there's one casino site, we do offer either a food voucher or a swag, an item, that might be either a notebook or a lunch box or something, or a cooler or whatnot. So depending on where the location they're doing the Play My Way, but it is upon the enrollment. So once they enroll, they will get either the credit into their account, or they will go to the Game Sense Information Center.
So, if I can just add on to that, incentive is really important. If you look at the online space with sports wagering, the enrollment in these types of programs is abysmal. It largely is less than 1% enrollment. If you look at enrollment into Play My Way in Massachusetts, it's greater than 11%. We have at one casino, I think it's much closer to around 20%. And I think largely incentives matter, but also the Game Sense team has champions really matter in this place. I think that it is an interesting question. How do we incentivize maintaining your budget, sticking with your budgets? We're working with Carleton University, Dr. Michael Wall, on the evaluation of Play My Way. We have a next wave of evaluation that we're trying to figure out how to provide that sort of incentive for people who maintain their budget. So it's a really good question. Thank you, Carolyn.
So the next, so voluntary self-exclusion, or we call it the VSE. So as of, I believe last week, we have over 17,300 enrollments, and out of or these are all folks who have actually done the VSE enrollment completed. Out of that, 1,700 are active enrollments, so they're actively enrolled in the VSE program. The VSE program in Massachusetts is an engaged approach. So really, this is where the game sense really meet with the patron, having a conversation, having a discussion, and really walking them through and explaining the terms that they're agreeing to, and providing any treatment resources as needed. And part of that approach is really trying to meet them where they're at, seeing what we can support and how we can offer and how we can sort of normalize what they're experiencing. And then as they approach their term, so once they finish the term, so in Massachusetts we offer a 1 year, 3 year, or 5 year term, and then we do offer a lifetime, but our requirement is that you have to either complete a shorter duration, so you have to complete your first term, or been enrolled in 6 months before you can elect to go and do a lifetime. We've done this just because we want to make sure people understand what the VSE program, because we do not do a waiver or reduce the time. Once you enrolled, you're set, and our expectation is that is the duration that you've agreed to. As you approach that term, you will not be removed from the list automatically once the term has ended. We put in a reentry education, or it's more of a reinstatement session. Is really, again, is a chance to meet with the patron, having a conversation, because they have VSE, they haven't been involved in the gaming, sort of work with them, sort of discuss any resources available and sort of any plans that they have in re-entering back to the gaming. But importantly, to let them know that we're there. Game Sense is there for them, so that if they do need help in the future, they can always come back. And the one new thing, as we rolled out the sports wagering, we created a form to allow patrons to decide if they want to VSE for the casino, or for sports wagering, or for both. So we made it easy, because we want people to have options. If they want to enroll into the VSE program, they can select either just exclude themselves from the casino, sports wagering, pari-mutuel, or they can just do the sports wagering. So now I'm going to sort of talk about the roadmap towards sports wagering, what we did or what we worked on as we prepared for sports wagering.
And if I could just say, as you start through this is where we really do seek to try to leverage research, leverage the evidence in order to chart the path forward, or chart the path into sports wagering. And so Long's going to talk about a couple key reports that we created that really tried to provide some structure or a framework to inform policy and regulations in Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mark. So 2 years before the sports wagering legislation passed, we produced a research really looking at literature review, findings from the 2018 and 2022 national surveys. And this research, or this report, was really targeted towards, or meant to be for, the legislators and commission, just to give an overview of the landscape, what sports wagering and potential impact that it can have on Massachusetts. So the research review and extracted from government websites, operators' websites, the American Gaming Association, the National Council on Problem Gambling. And so it's looking at a lot of the research around available, and sort of understand, what is the impact or how is sports wagering and how it can impact Massachusetts. And from that, oops, I got too excited. So then the first one is the potential economic impacts. So, the research found that, it's revenue maximization. So it requires online operators, not contingent on having collegiate sports betting. And then the other thing that came out was the economic benefits. Sports betting will primarily be redistribute money already in the economy, rather than attracting new money from outside Massachusetts. And the benefits can occur by redirecting money back to Massachusetts currently being spent on illegal sports betting. So, research did show that there was a great economic impact by legalizing sports wagering. And then the research also highlighted potential social impacts, that gambling harm and gambling problems likely to increase, but magnitude likely to be modest. Current rates of sports betting in Massachusetts similar to states where it has been legal for some years. Small proportion of Massachusetts population, about 13 to 20%, currently participates in sports betting. Even a higher rate of gambling problems among sports bettors will have fairly small effect on overall rate in population, and concerns remain on groups not previously involved in sports betting, adolescents, young emerging adults, women, immigrants, college athletes, individuals in recovery from gambling problems.
And just quickly, this is bearing out. We're about ready to release a report will indicate that the prevalence really hasn't increased overall. However, there are groups that are at considerable risk of gambling related harm. So yeah, I think that, and as well as the economic research has proven to be pretty spot on as well.
Yeah. And 1 year before sports wagering legislation passed, and this is right about when I started, Mark and Marie Claire Flores Peugeot, the research manager at the time, developed this white paper applying principles of the Massachusetts Responsible Gaming Framework to sports wagering policy and practice. So the target audience for this white paper were to the legislators and commissioners. This white paper really provided an overview orientation to responsible sports wagering practices and policies. It draws upon the guiding principles, strategies, and measures of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission's Responsible Gaming Framework that Mark mentioned previously, and the limited and very thoughtful body of research done in this area. And so from in this white paper, this is a summary overview of key relevant research findings, drawing from the Massachusetts Gambling Impact Cohort Study, or the MAGIC, and the Positive Play Measuring Responsible Gaming in Massachusetts, 2 out of the 6 arms that Mark mentioned in the research. And so here are the 5 overview. The sports wagering is a predictive variable for concurrent and future problem gambling. 2, there hasn't been a significant change in gambling participation on sports wagering. However, there is an increase in online wagering. 3, most Massachusetts players have medium or low levels of gambling literacy. 4, high frequency multi-game players were more likely to be male, younger, and less likely to be white, and reported more gambling related harms. And 5, personal responsibility, honesty, control of gambling, and pre-commitment to a money and time is correlated with higher levels of gambling satisfaction. So from the key relevant research findings, the 4 strategies and measures recommended to ensure sports wagering in the Commonwealth is conducted in a manner that minimizes harm are, and I'm not going to go through the bullet points, but just going to give you the 4 key groups. So 1, support positive play. 2, promote public health and safety. 3, ensure responsible marketing. And 4, commitment to improvement and reporting. Okay. And then, so 2 months before sports wagering legislation passed, I was on board with Marie Claire and Mark. We developed this white paper on responsible gaming consideration for gaming advertising. The target audience was really for the commissioners. It's really looking at the current Massachusetts statute, regulations, and framework related to advertising and marketing, an overview of somewhat relevant research findings, a review of selected regulations in the US, and consideration for additional strategies and measures regarding gambling advertising. And for that, in the white paper, we made some considerations for additional strategies and measures regarding gambling advertising. 1 was strengthen the Massachusetts Gaming Commission regulations. So there were 19 recommendations, including saturation, protections for vulnerable population, strengthen under 21 protections, truth in advertising, prohibit false, misleading, or encouraging risky gambling behavior. 2, we recommended establishing a compliance process, repurposed the Mass Gaming Commission's Fair Deal tip line to allow complaints about advertising. And 2, establish an advertising review advisory committee, or we call it ARC, to review marketing and advertising complaints. And then finally, we recommended requiring awareness and capacity building training. So this would be a mandatory training for casino hosts and key positions identified with involvement in advertising or marketing. And two, to promote safe and healthy gaming messages and ensure advertising materials are culturally appropriate. With that, I'm going to turn over to Mark to talk about the road ahead. More, now what? Now, where do we go from here?
Yeah. So the last piece that Long talked about around advertising. So we actually created that report in advance of the legislation actually passing, but we kind of knew it was going to pass. And we knew that advertising, based upon other jurisdictions, we knew that advertising was going to be a big issue. And it is a big issue for everyone here is concerned about it. And so that was the sort of the premise by which we drafted that specific paper. And so I'm going to talk about the road ahead and recognizing that, so we had a framework, we had a strategy when thinking about sports wagering coming to the Commonwealth. And now let's talk about kind of where do we go from here and what is important. So with that, next slide. So we want to expand on our research. We also recognize, as I imagine you do too, is that the impacts of sports wagering on youth and young adults are pretty profound. That there is an entirely new group of at-risk individuals when it comes to sports wagering. We mentioned this actually in the white paper early on, about 2 years before sports wagering passed. We kind of predicted that this would be the case, and it has turned out that way. Now, what do we do about it? It turned out to be true. We're going to be introducing a new line of research that focuses specifically on youth and young adults and the impacts. And we're studying it from different angles. I think that we have 3 or 4 different studies currently underway that are focusing on the impacts on young adults. We're about ready to release a study on gambling advertising. We wrote a white paper about considerations of gambling advertising from a responsible gaming perspective. Now we're going to be releasing a report in the next couple of months looking at sort of the early impacts of gambling advertising on gambling behavior. A couple other new areas, much like we did 2 years before passage of sports wagering, we saw it where we're looking around the corner to see what was happening. iGaming is the new sports wagering. And so we just procured a study looking at what the potential social and economic impacts of iGaming are in the Commonwealth. And then finally, thinking about responsible gaming tools, we are currently investing a lot of time, money, energy in exploring the utility of artificial intelligence within the gaming industry. Next slide. And so pivot, we're doing a pivot. I'm going to talk now about several other ways sort of on the RG side that we're looking at how we need to shift. One of those is, as I mentioned, we're rewriting the responsible gaming framework. So first version was in 2014, second in 2018, and this third will be in 2024. We're pivoting from the term from responsible gaming, which really focuses on the individual's gambling behavior, to player health. And that pivot is really important. And there's a significant paradigm shift when you think about focusing on behavior versus focusing on the player and how can we support the player. And that actually then leads to additional opportunities to engage additional initiatives that you can advance. And the other piece is that obviously this new framework is going to be really focusing on sports wagering and technology, and how do we make sure that we're leveraging the available technology, that we're addressing risks associated with sports wagering. Next slide. In terms of focusing on player health, one of key way that we can do that is really looking at how do we support family members of individuals who have a gambling problem. And this was actually sort of launched because there's a requirement within the Expanded Gaming Act that required family court exclusion. So a family member can initiate through the court system an exclusion from casinos in Massachusetts. That's interesting. There's no place else in the US that offers a family initiated court exclusion, casino exclusion. But there's also some concerns that lie behind that, and how it would be used and how you implement and that sort of thing. But we also recognize that that should be the end of the line. What other resources should be made available to the family to support the family in advance of that? And that means housing resources, health, self-help resources, financial resources, clinical treatment referrals, legal help, and addressing perhaps food insecurity. So we're developing some resources, some information, materials that kind of help support family members, recognizing that family court exclusion is out there and is a potential, but what can we do in advance? And that's partnerships with the Department of Public Health, with each of our casino operators, with Health and Human Services, a range of different partners coming to the table for this. Next slide. Another piece is that we're exploring additional options in self-exclusion. So recognizing that the technology has changed, that sports wagering is vastly different than casinos, that it's not just stopping somebody from entering the casino floor who's on the voluntary self-exclusion list. We need to think about this more broadly. We need to leverage the technology that exists. So we're looking at a partnership with something like Gamban that would offer a universal exclusion from all mobile sports wagering, legal, illegal, anything that basically anything you can get your hands on. We're also looking at a national voluntary self-exclusion program and partnering with other states to offer this. And this would, everybody for years has talked about how important and how this could be and how useful it could be. Technology has largely been a major barrier. Legislation, law, regulations, the hill is steep that you have to climb in order to get to this. And I think that we're seeing greater willingness. We're seeing technology advancing that would support it, and some true light at the end of the tunnel to hopefully move in this direction. So that's also something that we're actively working on. And the final, and this is probably, I can't emphasize enough how much potential there is in this space. And so, you're moving fast. So how do you identify player risk and how do you respond? So we talked about Play My Way. We talked about GameSense. These are largely reactive prevention types of programs. It's the individual needing to come to the center and engage with a GameSense advisor or enroll in some type of play management system. Risk identification and response utilizes AI technology in order to identify patterns of risky gambling behavior. Next slide, please. In order to identify patterns of risky gambling behavior in order to enable a response. So rather than reactive, this is an incredibly proactive way of intervening with players who are identifying any range of risk, whether it's very early identification of risk, or whether it's somebody who continues to gamble and has experiencing much greater risk. This is enabled by artificial intelligence. It's I think we can all agree it's something to be feared, but I think it's also something that holds great potential, especially in this space. So we last summer released an RFI, request for information, to gather key insights and key considerations of how we can possibly proceed in this space. Next slide. And I think that that while a lot of what we found from that RFI is that a lot of companies have the ability to do this. They have something waiting in the wings, and they have implemented it in jurisdictions where it's required. Most of those, however, have been outside of the United States, whether it's the UK or Australia or Europe, or more progressive or advanced responsible gaming or regulatory jurisdictions. And so I think that there's a great role for regulatory involvement to make sure that we look at the utility of these types of tools, that they're based in technology, that they're appropriately resourced, both in terms of what the tool is that identifies the risk, but also probably equally important is what do you do about that risk. And this is where a lot of companies have fallen short, and a lot of jurisdictions have fallen short, is science exists, evidence exists to identify risk, but what do you do about it? And so I think that's where Massachusetts is really focusing right now, is the response, recognizing technology exists. Next slide, please. That covers it. So just in summary, I think that as we see responsible gaming obviously as a core to the operation of the Gaming Commission, but we also recognize that you need to move forward and build evidence that supports the work that's being done. So, I think, Anne, we said we'd end at 9:50. It's 9:52.
Thank you both very much for this. I did have a couple questions around the GameSense and Play My Way. For GameSense, is there a cost to the casino and a cost to the state? I mean, how is it paid for, I guess?
Yeah, when it's the Public Health Trust Fund, so a percentage of the gross gaming revenue tax is allocated to this Public Health Trust Fund, and that pays for the GameSense program. So in essence, it's tax money that's dedicated towards mitigating gambling-related harm that we then turn around. We provide funding to the Mass Council on Gaming and Health to run and operate the GameSense information centers.
Okay. And that's working well still, and the partnership and
yeah, it's you don't want GameSense to be operated by the industry. We have examples. There's very many very well-intentioned casino companies that could develop the expertise in this space, but I think having that third-party independent vendor that has nothing to do with what's happening on the gaming floor or revenue that's generated, to have them operating the GameSense information centers makes perfect sense. The Gaming Commission we could build our own internal capacity to do this, but we're the government. And I don't know about Virginia, but there's an inherent sort of suspicion about that. It's this third-party vendor that this is what they do, this is what their focus is, that has made a huge difference, I think, in terms of players being receptive to the information that's being delivered. We want to break down as many barriers as possible to delivering responsible gaming information that advances positive play and creates informed player choice.
yeah. And I see Carolyn has a question for you. Carolyn, you're also put so you can unmute. But her question is, I am curious if you have any information on how many people have used the family exclusion program.
0, because we just launched it. We just literally drafted the regulation that supports it, and we're working with the court system currently in order to help them build their capacity to deliver this program. So another great question, Carolyn, but please stand by and we can report back to you in probably about a year, and hopefully we'll have some numbers to report.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's just very curious. All questions about competency and how much of legal rights have to be taken away before being put on this program or not. I mean, I can certainly see benefits from a family's perspective, but also questions about individual autonomy concerns and pieces. So it's going to be really curious to see how effective the program is.
I think you just did a much better job of articulating some of our reservations about it than Long or I did, and that's why I think it's really important to say, you know what, like, don't let this be the only option that family members have. Make sure that they're aware of what other resources are available in advance of that. And I feel like they think there's skepticism of, you know, the commission's involvement in delivering responsible gaming. I think that there's a healthy amount of skepticism of court involvement or legal involvement in this. So, but there's a lot that can be done in order to support family members, period.
Thank you.
And if I could say one other thing about that, our process of developing that piece, I went to each of the casino operators and I'm like, hey, you have family members that come talk to you and are like, they throw their arms up and they're like, we have no idea what to do with our family member who comes to your casino and has lost a lot of money. And so I was like, what do you do? What do you say to family members in this case? And yes, every casino that I talk to has dealt with this situation, but every casino I talk to deals with it differently. And it's not that it's a bad response. They take this issue on, but they, much like most people, don't truly know, like, there isn't a great response to this. So part of what we want to do is to give sort of a standard set of resources and information that can be delivered to family members. This is the sort of, when I talked in the framework about, it's not the industry, it's not the government, it's not, you know, service providers, it's not all on the individual. It really does take this sort of collaborative approach. And I think this is a good example of how we're looking to advance this on an important issue.
And can I just throw one thing? In the my part about the advertising white paper, I did forget to emphasize, you know, the recommendations that we put there came from the community-based research. So we did an Asian Care report where the Asian community in Boston sort of did a research on the impact of gambling and some of their concerns. And from that research, they offered a lot of insight on how advertising really impact that community. And from that, we drew that and incorporated in to the white paper. So I think, you know, it's really important to understand, you know, the Mass Gaming Commission, we looked at the research to sort of inform how we develop programs. And then from that program, we evaluate and research again to see, are we effective? Are we causing more harm, or are we addressing the concerns? So, you know, it is a relationship. It's a conversation, not a monologue.
Thank you so very much. I have 9:58 and I don't see any other questions right now, but if someone happens to think of something, if you mind if I email that to you, that'd be great. Thanks everybody for attending Adopting Responsible Gaming in the New Frontier with our wonderful, well, not hosts, but wonderful presenters from Mass Gaming Commission. And thank you both for doing this. And they are going to be sending the updated slides that we can post out with this recording.
Can I just say thank you again for inviting us. We fully welcome collaboration in other jurisdictions, especially as we, you know, especially sports wagering isn't bound by borders, state borders. And when we think about the use of technology to advance things like a national exclusion, we look at how we can do a better job of serving people through technology, through different means. Virginia and Massachusetts probably have more in common, and we can probably learn from you as well and advance some of these initiatives. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, and we'd love to collaborate on something in the future. That'd be great.
Right. Thank you,
Have a
everybody.
great day, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.